Great. So I have the great pleasure to introduce my co-host and friend, Judy Ireland. And I have said this many times, but I want to say it again, which is that Judy's really responsible for supporting performance poets in having a farther reach. Um, and she does the gorgeous graphics when we have our featured readers. So not only is she a steady co-host, but she also is a splendid graphic artist and a wonderful poet. And so I have the great pleasure of introducing Judy Ireland. Judy is the author of Cement Shoes, a poetry collection that won the Sinclair Poetry Prize in 2014. Her poems have appeared in Hotel America, Calyx, Saranac Review, Eclipse, Cold Mountain, Co-Review, and other journals, as well as in several anthologies. She is a poetry editor and reading series producer for the South Florida Poetry Journal and my co-director of Performance Poets of the Palm Beaches. She also teaches at Palm Beach State College. And with that, I give you Judy Ireland. And please mute yourselves.
Thank you, Susannah. I appreciate it. All your kind words. I've got a little bit of a lingering virus, so if I may have to mute myself and cough or something, but I'm going to try to get through as many poems as I can. Please excuse my voice. The first poem I want to share with you is one I tried to pick poems I don't read very often, and with a couple of exceptions. So this is one I don't think I've ever read at a reading, and it's with my firm belief that all of us who are poets probably were kind of weird kids. We probably had a sensitivity to language that other kids maybe don't have. So this poem is called Word Kid. The hours I spent cross-legged on the linoleum floor playing jacks, thinking about the arrogance of letters when they were uppercase, and the fact that other people had messy lives too, since debacle existed, and words were proof. We weren't the only yahoos, evidently. And since a man wrote a book about them, I had an inkling other children were also difficult, and other kids could read better than was good for them. I couldn't be the only kid pondering lassitude and lassie and trying to find the connection. There were other girls aplenty, right? Who hated how every word could be ruined by adding the prefix non to it. Bounce the ball, scoop the jacks, wonder if define has a definition. Thank you. So the next one is also one I've never read, and it's from childhood as well. Surprise visit by my older brother's probation officer. Mr. Struck brought 2 police officers, took us little kids into a bedroom and shut the door, left mother in the living room fuming. He asked if we'd seen any guns around the house, trying to sound like he was asking about a missing book or misplaced car keys. We knew it was a trick question. No guns laid across the rafters in the basement, which is where I would have hidden them. No guns under beds, no guns behind boxes of canning jars. When Mr. Struck let us out of the bedroom, mother could see he was disappointed. We kids, wide-eyed and silent. She locked the door after he left. Guns in the rafters would have been my first choice, or behind the water heater where the biggest spiders lived. I still remember the creak of the officers' leather holsters. For several nights, I woke from sleep to hear the sound of heavy boots on the stairs. The next one is also about my late brother, and it's one I've read before, but it's going to appear in the Amethyst Review on July 6th with the online edition, so I wanted to read it again. My late brother appears on my Apple Watch. He is wearing bib overalls, an owl on his shoulder, the literal ghost in the machine. An accidental tap on its face, a quick twist of the wrist. My watch dislodges my carefully calculated settings, and Edwin appears, fresh from my favorites. Every time I think he's been gone 20 years, it appears he finds a way to remind me. We abide everything, whether we like it or not. Just be sure to wear a leather glove on your hand if the bird who chooses you has talons. He and his great horned owl, me and my crows, our everyday familiars, never summoned, but appearing hungry and sure about everything that matters, bringing feathered peace that passes all understanding, and bony beaks that take all our unburnt offerings. Thank you. There are no cathedrals in my poems, no camel riders, horse jockeys, or salesmen. I never include things that happen at noon or on the way to the dumpster or in the frozen food aisle. Rarely do I mention washing my hands or Marianne. She is absent, the same way our entwined lives vanished from her mind, and I am left holding our wishes, a wet bag of sand that requires both hands. But now here she is, riding a camel at noon in a landscape I've never seen. There's a horse in the distance, a garden crow on its back, holding the reins in its beak, and my friend, my love, so out of place in the desert. She doesn't remember the night we saw the shooting star over I-94 in Minneapolis. And now here she is, riding alongside me in my Chevy Malibu, car heater on blast, her long knitted scarf thrown in back, her bare throat glowing as she exclaims, "I never thought it would be green." Thank you. To keep with the elegiac theme here, this is one, a day passed and I forgot about. A first, not last, chance to live with part of one's heart partitioned off, like a doctor's waiting room, anxious, sniffling people sitting engrossed in their phones or the droning TV, reading magazines they'd never read at home. How does this happen after years and years? Time's scraped its knuckles bare on this cold cement. Memories put itself to sleep with a glass of whiskey here, some chloroform there, a hand pressed firmly over mouth and nose, an arm around a rib cage, wrestling one's own body to the ground. This is something I've waited for, but now when the thought returns, it touches down, the tip of its stinger encountering flesh, mandibles working above jointed legs, the taste of nectar. This is a recent poem called Waitress, and thanks to my dear friends for feedback with this, it's now finished. Waitress. A customer writes a poem on an index card he hands to her along with a 20, not waiting for change or a thank you. The poem sizzles in the pocket of her apron until she goes home and reads it to her cat. The words hang in the air like the bacon smell that clings to every strand of hair, even when she unwinds it from her bun. Dust from the road drifts in through cracks around the door. The landlord, who also handed her a poem written on the Home Depot receipt, came once before with weather stripping, but it only softened and compressed in the heat, created new openings. Her body is asking for deeper breaths. Sitting in a kitchen chair, she swings her feet from the knee like she's 8 or 10 or 12. The cat disappears. She doesn't want any more poems. The fridge is empty, but she knows the produce manager at the supermart is already composing on a scrap of butcher paper. She might as well just get up and go. Thank you. The next poem is Lunch with Lee, and it refers to Lee Miller. She was a fashion model, and most people in America that know of her as a fashion model, but she was also a wartime photographer and took some of the most amazing photographs during the war, where she got in her fatigues and combat boots and went right out there and did her thing. One of her most famous photographs is her taking a bath in Hitler's bathtub. They chased him out of an apartment he was in, and when she and the other troops went in, she got into the bathtub and another photographer took her photo. She also hung out a lot with the other surrealists of the time, and she is considered a surrealist on her own. So Lunch with Lee has a quote from Lee Miller: "I'd rather take a picture than be one." Her cameras are everywhere. Barely room for the plate of tiny mustachioed sandwiches. barely room for the liver pate molded into the shape of a lobster. I hold my glass above the fray, Dolly's Casanova cocktail with its orange, brandy, and bitters. Lee lines up a shot of the crook of my elbow, which appears to disappear behind the centerpiece. There's a camera in my chair, so I stand while she shoots, the halo of sun around my reading chair, the round of brie dripping off the table onto the tile like a clock, the skein of hair falling out from under its pins and falling onto the back of my neck. The war killed her appetite. Tiny cups of coffee fit perfectly on the crowded table. One sip and all clear. Lee picks up her camera and shoots. Thank you. And I'll continue in the surrealist vein. This one is called Improviso. Someone put a music stand in the dumpster. You rescue it. You buy a recorder, study music, star in your own musical. A new tempo resonates as you catch the bus and ride downtown. There's an old woman across the aisle, face so pale. She turns to the window glass, her frayed collar reflected back. She has exact change for everything. You make a frame with your thumbs and fingers that fits the circle of her head. If you were Fellini, she would be an extra in your movie. The trailer would begin with a split screen. You on the left is playing super fast cascading notes on your recorder, and on the right side, her wide face from the outside of the glass. Future as vulture, at first seated, now disembarked. The bus pulls away. There she stands with the music stand in front of her, and she sings. Thank you. This is a poem I wrote in Anxiety Kita's workshop. And she asked us to write a poem about where we live now and how we feel about it. And so this was my... West Palm Beach, Florida. Everyone here is from somewhere else. Flying saucers dropped mid-swamp, sliding toward the ocean, 9.3 million of us not counting Palm Beach. The gap between the haves and have-nots, an intercoastal waterway. I believe this is some of Rockefeller's doings, my mother would say. Why you want to go down there? Because I want to see the empty, soulless hunger in an alligator's jaws, cross the street for free mangoes, get gifts from neighbors, island food, my mouth a hot mash of patties and jerk. Watch me dig holes in sandy earth, watch them fill back in again. You find tiny seashells when you dig down here, miles of old ocean now blanketed with air. Breathe in palm trees, breathe out strip malls, asphalt. But if you rush outdoors at dusk, camera in hand, you can catch a palm in silhouette. You can learn new words every day. Bienvenidos, welcome, como ie, how are you? Feel your tongue refuse what babies easily do. Watch the weather, 93% humidity. Be a buyer of batteries and bottled water. I want to be where it's 93 degrees in the shade and December tastes like arroz con gandules, rice and pigeon peas, eaten in the backyard, sitting in a lawn chair next to a royal palm, wrapped with a string of Christmas lights. I am now from here. Thank you. So I'll end with a poem called Sorry I Forgot to Tell You, and with a little tropical flavor as well. Sorry I forgot to tell you. I guess it got lost in between you playing salsa all day on that loud party speaker you bought at Big Lots, and your backyard full of smoke and sizzle from the giant grill, racks filled with jerk chicken and dewy sausage, aluminum foil bundles of onions and peppers. And then when I was about to broach the subject, you suggested I try out the hammock before the food got done. I certainly couldn't speak with my mouth full later, and then the sun set behind your white vinyl fence, made a glow, fully enhanced by the bottles of Corona we drank, despite my not being a big fan of beer. It was just too easy, the forgetting and the music and the heat like a soft blanket with just my toes sticking out, and the words falling back down inside me like delicious musical notes or the blue blink of stars above everything not needed in that moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. So Judy will open up the chat
Nice.
so that you can put your comments there for her, and we would appreciate that. I misspoke. You can't actually put anything in the chat until the chat is open. So now the chat's open. So if you would, please. Thank you. And now my friend Joanna is going to do my intro. Joanna, thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce you. We have been friends since we were teenagers, and we were reading and writing poetry even then. And Susannah, you're a leading light for this group, and you have encouraged many writers over the years and continue to do so. Your many honors include publishing your work in North American Review, Homemade.
Judy, Joanna, your sound is going in and out, and we don't want to miss a word of my intro.
Okay. I'm not sure what's going on with the sound. Is that a little better? No? Can you hear me now? You can? Okay. I'm going to start all over again with the list of your many honors in publishing work. North American Review, Homemade, Wisconsin, South Carolina Review, Nimrod International, Poet Lore, Xavier Review, among many others. You've also been anthologized in Pullman and Foxglove by Three Drops Press UK, Fierce Words from the Intangible World, Southern Florida Poetry Journal, and Beyond Words, Women, Life. Your book, Geography of Love and Exile, was published by Servina Barba Press, and a couple of new pieces are forthcoming, including Mother Wind in late 2024 from Pinewood Press, and your collection, Dharma of Death and Desire, is also forthcoming from Shanti Arts Press next year in 2025. Susannah is a hospice nurse. She facilitates therapeutic writing groups for substance abuse treatment centers, and she is the founder and co-director of this group, Performance Poets of Palm Beach's monthly reading series. Susannah.
Thank you, Joanna. So the two things that it wasn't completely clear, but I'm so pleased about them that I want to just say them out loud. So Dharma of Death and Desire has been accepted by Shanti Arts Press, and that'll come out in 2025. And then within the same week, I got word that my book, Mother Wind, is going to be published this year, sometime between late fall and winter. So I'm really happy about both of those pieces of news. So thanks, Joanna. So I'm going to read two new pieces. Because it's National Women's Month, many of the poems that I've chosen have a female protagonist, if you will. So this is written about F. Scott Fitzgerald's wife, Zelda, who they were both prodigious drunks. But Zelda was the one who was put away in a mental institution and died sedated in a fire. After the fire, Zelda confesses, "I must forgive him his thirst. There was something touching about his white, blonde hair parted just so, and that fine scalp, a pink hue of ballet slippers. I was an unlikely Southern belle, built like a boy, but made for these flapper fashions, perfect clothes for a body like mine, angular and lean, pois de soie, satin cut on the bias, it hung just so, my bright blonde madcap Marcel waves perfect under my velvet cloche, and I was wound as tightly as a spring in a child's tin toy. What dare wouldn't I do? He liked it when I drank, laughed when I raced the coupe up and down the beach. He liked it when I said, let's stay up all night and drive to Montenegro. Liked it when I shocked men at parties, claiming no panties. But his interest waned. I couldn't be clever long enough to hold his attention. Couldn't dance fast enough to keep up with his drifting heart. It was crystal clear. He casually invited Gerald and his wife to lunch with us, then stay with us, to drink Cristal with us, to lounge and languish beneath that striped Côte d'Azur awning. Scott's thirst included Sarah's lush, high breasts. He watched closely as her flesh failed to be contained, watched as she spilled out of her horrible knitted bathing costume, not a shred of decency, not a moment of lining. Treachery of white cotton thread, and mine too, sagging with the weight of water, sagging with my despair, drenched by my forced devil-may-care. And this next poem, Starvation Peak, I decided to do the depressing poems first. So this one has been accepted for publication by Mariah Literary Journal. I think it's coming out in May. Starvation Peak. It was under the shadow of Starvation Peak she started shoving white flour tortillas into her mouth while he slept, her hot head pressed against the refrigerator. He would fry onions and potatoes in bacon lard, and she ate them. She was starving, except she wasn't. He was shrinking behind napalm and Agent Orange and defoliation and sniper fire, except he wasn't. He said she'd gotten as big as a house, except she hadn't. The neighbors would shoot the leg off their dog for chasing cows, except he didn't. She sewed and painted and pined for green, for water, for the wind to stop. As he slept and snored, she lay awake and stared at the cobwebbed vigas and circles of tin can tops nailed across ceiling knotholes. While she worked, he smoked and stared and fished and filled the freezer with trout she wouldn't eat. At the Rialto, she ordered chicharrones and sopapillas in honey and gulped them down to the dead place to fill the circular spinning black hole, except it never did. He rode off on a gold-wing motorcycle to find himself, except he never would. Instead, his bowels devoured him from the inside, eventually starving him to death. And the last super depressing poem. The Man Who Loved Books. The woman is dying in the front room. The dog sleeps at her feet. The man paces from his shelf-lined study to the front room, where southwestern light streams across his wife's bed, across the sleeping dog, and warms saltillo tiles. The man paces between his books and his dying wife. The nurse encourages him to say to his wife, "It's okay to go. I will be fine here." Instead, he sits at her bedside in the front room and recounts versions of Shakespeare. There was a prince of Denmark. In Verona, two star-crossed lovers. Shipwreck, revenge, father and daughter. A king is insane. Three witches stir a brew. A shrew is tamed. Folly, in a dark midsummer's wood. Mercy and a pound of flesh. The wife murmurs. Sometimes her eyelids flicker. He hopes she hears him. He tells his wife of profound tenderness that lives on the pages of Rumi, Hafiz, and Sappho. The nurse assures him, hearing is the last sense to go, but the man wonders, how could we know? How do we know? Still, he tells his wife a tale of imprisonment, of injustice at the Chateau d'If, philosophy of the Little Prince, and how deep sadness lives in Tolstoy's Anna. The dog follows the man as he moves from bookshelves to his wife's bedside in the front room. The dog watches as the man then places each book in packing crates labeled donations. The dog whimpers, but the man tells the dog of heroism, of risk, of jousting windmills and magical swords in stone. When the last book is packed, all the shelves empty, the man takes a rope to the back shed, locking the shed door from the inside. His wife, barely breathing, murmurs, her eyelids flicker, and the dog sleeps on sun-warmed tiles in the front room. Thank you. And so I'm going to read a couple of pieces from Dharma of Death and Desire. That's the one that Shanty Arts has agreed to publish. And I'm going to read a couple of poems that were published by South Florida Poetry Journal. One of the first one I'm reading is one of my favorite poems of all times. I rarely get a chance to read my own favorite poem, but here it is. Word Witch. On August nights, the words summer and heat evaporate from her sweat, while above her head the words grotto and gallinule form a wreath as she sleeps, and aphrodisiac and Isle of Langerhans move over to make room in her bed. She pays the woodman with words like thank you and it's perfect, to build more shelves for fat volumes of words in Italian and French, for dictionaries revised, unabridged, and annotated, and for biographies, fables, and fiction. Her lovers are synonyms and eponyms, and her walks on the beach leave the imprint foot, foot, foot in the sand. She spoons sonnets out of her soup, and letters form from her tossed apple skins. Tomatoes in the garden climb up in red words, hardy boy and heirloom, and the columbine and the lupine know to speak to her and say, purple or yellow blossom here and here on my stalk. The river whispers water and ripple, and the wind too knows to say gust or blow. In April, the calamundan tree is hung with the words orange globe, tart fruit, bird treat. And in May, the frangipani understands her need to read fragrant flower lettered along its branches. And this is another, thank you. This is another one that was published in South Florida Poetry Journal. Thank you, you guys. Literary lasciviousness. Now I love this one because it's so saucy. Love Sonnet number 57,872. First, we'd have a cup of T.S. Eliot in a London bookshop, and I would notice your cufflinks, your civilized buffed nails, and the crisp part in your Pantene hair. But I know it would move very swiftly, Jonathan. It would disintegrate to me slathering you with Shakespeare, measuring your Dickinson against my Virginia Woolf. And then we would be discovered bucking under a Bukowski line that would blow your mind, and I would lick Li Po off your lower lip and want to Faulkner you until you are incoherent and rambling into the night. Okay. Thank you. This is also from Dharma. The engraved stone read Imagine. Imagine you are the peeling yellow plaster house in the French Quarter, and you are the elaborate verdigris balustrade on the second floor. You are the view down over Market Street, and when the summer rains come, as they always do, you are the floor-to-ceiling shutters painted sky blue, which I close against the damp nights and open just in time for dawn to light our bed. You are the bed, the sheets, the folding screen behind which I undress. You are the slow-moving fan above my sleeping form. And you are the chicory morning coffee, the cream, the fresh beignets. And you are the serving tray placed beside me. Thank you. And I'll have just three more. Reprise. He remembers the press of my young thigh against his cheek, remembers the scent of my bed and the sounds of my sighs. He recalls the curve of my hip, clad in black satin, and remembers a halo of my hair under lamplight. He translates the song of the dragonfly, whale, and bee, and reorders the architecture of clouds above me. His kiss, like the razor edge of a palm leaf, draws dark blood from my lip, and his tongue inhabits shower droplets as they slip between the folds of my skin. He is the bougainvillea's purple pigment, and his absence is the surprising prick of its thorn. His hand is wind rippling green water, He is North Star, sextant, spyglass, oarlock, and rudder. In his wake, cataclysmic waves capsize, beach this vessel. Thank you. And close with film noir. In these movies, the streets are dark and slick with rain. The men wear belted trench coats, have heavy 5 o'clock shadows, and are always spies or gumshoes. The women have bee-stung lips and names like Dolores or Betty or Agnes. These films blot out the Friday fact that you haven't called, and they erase the Sunday myth that you will show up at 8 p.m. with a miniature box of watercolors, a splendid geode, or an ancient map of the world. And the last poem I want to read is I have a collection of poems about my heroes, women heroines, and Rachel Carson is one. So so this is a poem about Rachel Carson. Rachel Carson silently weeps. Awards have been named in my honor. Marine science vessels and tracts of wild land carry my name. Even agencies sprung up from my wellspring. Though my research stood far and above the rest, they were suspicious. I was young, pretty, unmarried. Some whispered, she must be a communist. They wanted to kill gypsy moths and control crops through embryonic anomalies mounted, undeniable mutations formed, and tumors erupted in animal livers. I know barrels of waste are still rolled off tankers, sealed and weighted as if the sea will not find them, crack them, and open them with water's curiosity. And always, my summers were spent with Dorothy, heads down, peering through our reflections, scouring Sheepscot Bay, feet in the cold rock shallows, pacing the water's edge. Tumors erupted in me. Then the science of Nagasaki and Hiroshima was brought to bear on my bare breasts. I would write to Dorothy, my dearest, I am shedding burned skin. I am like the gypsy moth, weakened and dying from their poisons. And the last poem is a nod to Stephen. It's about Frida Kahlo. Frida, the bed, and the mirror. The bed, it was a necessity, since standing proved impossible, and sitting drove the swords of pain straight through. Mother was not alone. My sisters bathed me and braided my hair. Mother insisted on ribbons and lace and chose the woven fiesta colors of her ancestors to dress me. She had servants to wash the soiled bedclothes, to bleach and hang them out to dry, when my own beleaguered body painted its liquid betrayal of blood or piss onto the canvas of my bed linens. She kept potted lavender in all four corners, and each morning the maids threw open the red shutters to keep the sick room fresh, even though linseed oil covered all odors of my humanness. My papa ground the earth pigments and mixed the chalks, and then hung the mirror from the cool white plaster ceiling above the bed. But when Diego visited, I used that mirror for more than portrait painting. Thank you all.